Welcome to the GSMC Pets Podcast, the show that caters to pet lovers of all kinds. We'll talk about pets on social media, pets doing amazing things, and how to take care of the pets in your life. Whether your pet is a dog, a cat, a llama, hamster, reptile, or something more exotic, you'll find educational and entertaining information on the GSMC Pets Podcast.
Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Pets Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Samantha Melvin, with a strange topic today. Now, I have a few questions to start this off. How many of you have rolled up a newspaper and swatted a spider? Okay. How many of you have stomped on a spricket? Next question would be, do you know what a spricket is? And then my last question for you. How many times have you burnt your house down because you found one of those giant cockroaches? So I bet you're wondering now, it's like, are we seriously going to be talking about what I think you're going to be talking about? And yes, we are seriously talking about bugs and arachnids for this episode. And, well, just think of them as very non-traditional, exotic pets. You've probably never considered an insect as a pet before, yes, but people do this, and we have to talk about it because it's been on my brain for days now. And we need to talk about, before we even get started on like all kinds of stranger pets, we should start with one that we're familiar with it. And that is the tarantula. And then maybe you've heard about pet cockroaches before. Yeah, that's a thing. And maybe if you were a parent, your child has probably asked you to let them have cockroaches and let them keep them as a pet. But it couldn't be worse than millipedes, right? Maybe you started negotiating, and maybe instead of that millipede or cockroach, you decided to suggest mealworms. And then you received that stink eye and, what? And then, well, maybe after that, and you realize they were unhappy with the compromise, they gave you a very stern look and said, I want a scorpion then. So it's a game of push and pull, and it has to end, and eventually someone's going to have to give up. And, well, let's just say that you were the one that gave up. You are going to have something to cushion the blow right now, I bet. And, well, why not just hear about my own little stories about my pets and how they can be a bit of a bother sometimes. And now the first tarantula that I ever saw in my entire life, and it wasn't even in person, but it was in the movie Home Alone, the first one. And I remember that Kevin had an older brother that was basically keeping a tarantula for himself, and it had a nice little terrarium and it had a lot of green stuff in it, and for some reason, Kevin's brother put him on the top shelf of his, I think it was like a bookcase. No, surely it wasn't a bookcase. Like, they were trying to make him seem stupid in the movie. But anyway, like, he had this tarantula at a very unreachable place. And that always just seemed kind of weird to me. But, there's some things that I have to kind of get into to kind of explain why this kind of setup was not exactly ideal for the tarantula. And, well, for one thing, did you know that there are 800 different species of tarantulas within a particular scientific family? I didn't know that. I just thought there was just tarantula, and that was it. But no, they actually come from a wide variety of areas and climates, like, from arid, subtropical, and over to tropical. And they're actually also divided up into, like, the old world and the new world. So the stuff that comes from the Eastern Hemisphere and then the stuff that comes from the Western Hemisphere. And I'm just kind of, my heart's kind of pounding right now. This is actually supposed to be a therapeutic episode for me where I actually talk about something that I find terrifying. But back to this. So typically when it comes to getting a tarantula into your house and, raising it as a pet, well, typically the best one to keep as a pet is going to be the Chilean rose tarantula because, well, they're very easy to care for as a spider, considering that there can be a lot of stuff that can potentially harm this little guy. But when I say little, I mean okay, yeah, fine. Adult size is like 5 to 8 inches, and they are only expected to live for maybe 8 to 10 years. So it's short-lived, and parents, you won't have to worry about it too much for very long. But so there are like 2 different kinds that I've read about, and there's ground dwellers that also burrow into the dirt, basically, or into grass, whatever. And then there's the arboreal ones, which are the ones that tend to be up in the trees, and they're just climbing all over the place, and they're actually very fast-moving, these kinds of tarantula, which makes arboreal ones like the most difficult to have. Well, especially when they run out, because they're fast and they're agile, and just they could probably like crawl up somewhere because they're so good at climbing stuff that you'd have more difficulty then. Now the ground dwellers and the burrowers are actually a lot easier because they're slower moving, and that makes it a bit easier in case little Jimmy let his tarantula out again. But one of the first tarantula that is actually considered a good first arboreal tarantula for someone is called the pig-toe tarantula. And I don't want to know more about this because, well, I don't want to. So as a pet, it's usually a better choice to get like a female one because, well, they tend to be living longer lives, and like they can actually be expected to live over like 20 years, whereas the male can, be maybe a few years at best. So, mom and dad, you make your choice on that. But when it comes to housing a tarantula, like you want to have, a nice small space that your tarantula can burrow into. Like it should be like 3 times the cage or the terrarium should be like 3 times the span of your leg, and then double the leg span of your for the width. Sorry. So it's generally squat, but then when you look at a terrarium for one of those arboreal ones, they actually have to be a bit high because you want to put in like branches and other kinds of greens that your buddy can climb on. I just called a tarantula a buddy. Oh god. But let's also say that, maybe the larger tank isn't the best. It's recommended like 5-gallon aquariums will work. So, it kind of doesn't really take up much space, which is great for, the house. Like you don't have, say, a giant spider running around and knocking over your vases and using the bathroom on your rug that you just bought. But, that's neither here nor there. But they really try to, but for those different types of tarantulas, well, they do have different needs, and you have to be very aware of them. So when it comes to actually keeping them, like, inside of that terrarium or aquarium, whichever you choose, like, the tarantula doesn't really need, like, bright lights, and it would rather be, like, in a dark space, kind of like at the very corner the cage, and, it's like for heating purposes, but in my mind, I'm also thinking, well, they could be vampires. But most species of tarantula do find somewhere between 75 to 85 degrees Fahrenheit. But they don't always require the high humidity levels. Like, having a water dish in a cage that's misting once a week would be fine. But still, vampire. I keep on thinking vampire. But the cages should not be cleaned frequently because, well, the spiders try to keep a relatively low humidity level once a year. So when it comes to, like, heating in general, it's going to kind of depend on how often you feel like cleaning the aquarium or terrarium. So it's kind of recommended for low humidity levels, maybe like once or twice a year is likely enough to, take care of any of the early mold or fungus or, mites, which would be worse than just having a tarantula. But, for the higher humidity environment, they need to be done more often. So for me, I'd probably do it almost every month. But hey, I don't really know. But for food and water, tarantulas, they're kind of like snakes too. Oh my gosh. They have a diet of crickets. Or maybe frog. But they do like to eat crickets, and they supplement it with other insects that is pretty easy for them to eat. So some owners may try to, imitate how a spider would eat in the wild, or, they would just offer the meals at random. One cricket here or there, it'll be fine. But adults also may fast for an extended period of time, pretty much before they start molting. And growing spiders, however, should be fed several times a week. And let's get back to that molting thing. It's a very gross thing that I saw. Like, where did I see this? But, oh yeah, this little guy. Sorry, I'm looking at a picture of a tarantula coming out of its molting shell. Oof. I like pets. I can have a tarantula. But, alright, so molting, it's when the spider needs to get to a larger size, and, they're shedding the old exoskeleton and they're producing a new one. This is a very stressful time for the spider, and also for me if I ever had a tarantula, because I didn't want to see that stuff. And this is actually also when the humidity levels are probably the most critical at this point. So essentially, during molting, the spider will stop eating and they'll lay down on its back to molt. Then the actual process of molting will be maybe not a couple hours, maybe many hours, I would say. So once the old exoskeleton is shed, it will take several days, like the tarantula will take several days for it to grow a new one or allow a new one to harden. So during this time period, the spider is probably just gonna chill and, be as careful as possible. And this is probably the most important time where you do not touch the spider. It's definitely not a good idea, because it could be, because its exoskeleton is so soft, you could potentially hurt it pretty bad. And, well, you want to make sure you maximize the amount of time you have with this little buddy. Now, I imagine that a lot of people are wondering, well, what if the, not even what if, it's like, is the tarantula venomous, isn't it? Well, yes, kind of, but here's the thing. It's mostly like a bee sting. So, depending on, the individual that's being stung, it's just kind of going back to, what are you allergic to? So, of course, if you're allergic to tarantula stings, then you should definitely go to the hospital. But, or maybe even have an EpiPen at hand. But, yeah, it's tarantulas, man. It always kind of freaks me out. It still does freak me out. But overall, like, if you want to have a tarantula, make sure to do your research. You need to make sure that you keep it safe, that you don't drop it, because that could also hurt them. So being gentle, being patient, and just having this weird fascination with tarantulas, that's probably another thing you need. And it doesn't make you weird to want a tarantula, I promise. I've just seen a lot of tarantulas that really give me the heebie-jeebies. But anyway, next we're going to be talking about one of my most favorite things, and that is the cockroach. So, we'll be back after this commercial break.
Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? The GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast is a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts America Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today. Download the GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
We are back, and we were just talking about tarantulas, and, after reading about the tarantulas, they aren't so bad. I have a fear of, things that kind of are, that kind of crawl. But now we are going to be talking about the Madagascar hissing cockroach. Yes, that sounds very official, doesn't it? Well, they kind of are a big deal. They actually are pretty big. It can be like up to 3 inches long, and they can live to be, about 5 years old, at the most. So when you think of cockroaches, you think of those ones that kind of crawl around, and if you bother them too much, they might fly at your face. The great thing about this hissing cockroach is that they don't fly. They can't fly. But they're really good at climbing basically like anything, including glass. So they actually also, and this is how they hiss. They don't have like teeth to do the hiss thing, but they do. They do have like some spiracles that are tubes that the insects use for breathing, and they use that to create that hissing sound. So it's used whenever they're when they feel disturbed, and also when they're courting females. So it has its purposes. And apparently they can actually also like hiss as a larger group. Apparently, like in unison, actually. But researchers aren't able to figure that out quite yet. I would love to know what causes them to do that, though. But just so you know, there are some states, including Florida, for instance, where individuals and institutions have to have a permit to like have like these lone hissers or breeding colonies. So keep that in mind if you do want to take on a little hissing cockroach. Every single time I say that, it's like a mouthful. Can I just call them roaches at this point now? But like they have like this abdomen this tube in their abdomen, which I said were the spiracles, and they kind of force the air through the spiracles to produce that hissing sound. And there are actually a ton of different kinds of hissing. We can't really tell because, our ears aren't that good in comparison to, like, other species. And, well, a hiss is a hiss, right? Maybe. Well, I would actually believe that pretty well because cats have a different kind of hissing sound, like, where they get increasingly upset. But they definitely don't, from what I understand, they don't hiss for, finding a little partner. But it is kind of weird, and I kind of want to hear it, but I also don't want to hear it. But this entire cockroach thing, like, I have so many flashbacks of things involving cockroaches that are very traumatizing for me, but I'm trying to get over those fears. And I just remember seeing on Facebook one day, one of my friends, she was just in a lab with a bunch of kids, and she was letting, like, I don't know, 4 or 5 cockroaches on her, and they were just crawling. And then the next day I come over to her, it's like, why were you hanging out with cockroaches? And then she told me, it's like, they're actually really cute. And then I burned my house to the ground. No, I didn't. I just kind of accepted it, and to each their own, because, well, I guess they can be cute if you don't have that connection of grossness of them. No, this is sad. Actually, I will go ahead and say the ones that I'm seeing, if I were not afraid of cockroaches, I would think it'd be kind of cute, actually. So, it's kind of, yeah, I don't think I could ever have a cockroach. But when it comes to actually housing them, it's, it's kind of like how you do the tarantula, where you have, like, a fish tank and, like, 10, for this particular, species of cockroaches, like, you could put in several of these little guys into, like, a 10 to 15 gallon fish tank. So, and that's for them to be comfortable. I wouldn't want to push it anymore. Because now I'm thinking about that King of the Hill episode of when, Dale had his son, like, breeding cockroaches, and for some reason he took the cockroach to this office job that he hated. And then the cockroaches were released, and they were everywhere, and now that's kind of traumatizing me even more. But anyway, the thing is that, all of these cockroaches can be cute, and they seem very gentle, and it takes a very gentle hand to do that. So I wouldn't fault anyone for really liking them. But, so, back to this housing them, like, you need to have, like, a mesh lid on top of it, and it needs to definitely be, secured, because you definitely don't want those guys, running around and disappearing, and then, they end up being, stepped on, or they fall and they, unfortunately pass. So there are a lot of things that you need to really be considerate about, and that is definitely the lid of your tank. So, they really like to, again, these are kind of burrows too, but they like to have, like, a particular shaving of wood that really works best for them, and that's called aspen wood shavings. So it's great for the cockroach, and then also, like, it just kind of, like, pulls you away from the usual cedar or pine, because they don't particularly like that. And I find it interesting that they're quite picky about that. Isn't wood? But hey, I'm not a cockroach. I don't know. So, you're definitely going to try to have places where they can, like, burrow into. You want to make sure they have hiding places, because they don't really like light, obviously, because they run away when you turn on lights. And, well, I don't know, like, have different cardboard rolls, toilet paper, maybe an egg carton, part of an egg carton at least. But, make sure that they have places that they can hide into, and they aren't really exposed to that much light. They will come out when they feel like it. So they're most at home with like, room temperature rooms, so that they will actually thrive there. But when it comes to like water, like you need to make sure that you have enough water for them. And you should probably put like a cotton ball in there so they don't fall into the water pan and potentially drown. You don't want that. And, well, when it comes to eating, like I always think, man, what do they actually eat? And then after some research, I saw that they actually like their fresh fruits and vegetables, including romaine and other leafy greens, except not iceberg lettuce. These little guys are really picky, but, I can respect that they like to have a balanced enough diet. I mean, they do better than me, for sure. And, on top of that, they also need, like, some pellet food so that it's, something that's high in protein, like a dog food. So, carrots are also a favorite for them, like, along with oranges, apples, bananas, tomatoes, celery, squash, the list goes on. But they do, for anything that they don't eat, you really need to remove them because these particular cockroaches don't eat anything that is decaying. So keep that in mind. You want to make sure that it's relatively clean for them, and, then you don't have to worry about the, I don't even know what kind of fear that would be, but just seeing like food decay growing in your room, the smell, all that kind of stuff. Thank God these little guys do not have that desire to eat that. So, in a way, it's kind of like having a hamster, right? Maybe? So, they're actually really, really healthy little guys. Like, they molt, just like the tarantula, and like around 7 months is when they stop molting, because that's when they're at full maturity. But aside from that, being stepped on or falling or drowning, well, I mean, that's pretty good for these little guys. Like, I don't know, gosh. The more I look at these pictures, the more I think, well, I guess they could be okay. I mean, I would say that it'd be nice to watch them kind of like go around in their little habitat. It'd be cute, but I wouldn't want one. I could admire from a distance, I guess. That seems nice, instead of me just being outright repulsed by them. Because again, there are people that really do like these insects, and I would definitely, think that if this is one of the best insect pets for a child to start on, or any person to start on, it would definitely be perfectly fine with me. I would just, if my child were to ever want a cockroach, I would probably really be draconic about, hey, is that lid actually secured? And just kind of check almost every day to make sure that it's sealed. But, you can do stuff for the people that you love. And I would say, I don't know what to say. I just keep on looking at this picture of this cockroach, and I just kind of start freaking out in my head. But again, you can do stuff for your loved ones to get them to be happy and to, focus on things that they enjoy. And if it's cockroaches, hissing cockroaches in particular, I would be, for me, I'd be fine with it. It would take an adjustment period, though. So we are going to be back after this next commercial. We are now going to be talking about millipedes. Yeah, they apparently can be pets, too. And before you go reading like a brief description or Google any images of them, please just stay with me for now. Okay? Just give me a few moments, and then I will tell you all you need to know about millipedes, and then you can go and look at a picture of it. All right. Be right back, guys.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
So we're back, and I'm pretty sure that this will be a very intense episode for me for probably the rest of the time. Because, well, insects, they, cockroaches and, cockroaches in particular, but they can be cute. They can be. And then, also tarantulas can be more acceptable. As I keep on going down this rabbit hole of, hey, this is one of the other insect pets, I feel like I can actually handle it a little bit more. And surely it cannot get worse than what I'm going to look at right now, which is the millipede, or in particular, the African giant millipede, which can actually get up to maybe 11 inches. So they're big puppies. And, well, they're not really insects per se. They're, relatives to crabs and shrimp. So again, they're not really, insects if that helps. I don't know if it does me. But yeah, there are different kinds of millipedes that you can get, though they're all kind of blanket term, giant millipede. And I will say that they're going to be with you for a while. Same thing like the tarantula, 10 years. But they're relatively easy to take care of, and that is kind of good for kids that want to start, or, someone that's just brand new at pet owning. I mean, that's interesting to start off on. But, they are really docile, and they're slow moving, and they just kind of they get along well with any other millipedes that you'll have when, having the tank with them. And it's like a 10, 15 gallon tank. And this is constant things that I'm noticing. Around that size of a tank is good for any type of insect-like creature you want to have as a pet. So, the thing is, you want to make sure that you don't get opposite sexes, because they do breed a lot. And it's, you will end up with a lot of millipedes if you don't do anything about that. They also go through the molting process. And I will say that I don't get a very big graphic idea of it. I kind of think of it like a snake in a way. But they they get an additional segment in more legs as they molt. So, keep that in mind if you're kind of faint of heart, and maybe it might not be the right pet for you. But for millipedes, they're actually very easygoing, and they can actually be easily frightened, so skittish like a cat, I guess. And they usually have two forms of defense, and that's, curling into a very tight spiral. And then they also secrete an irritating liquid that's actually pretty bad for you, in a way that it's if it gets in your eyes or in your mouth, then you better be taking care of yourself. So despite its name, the millipede does not actually have 1,000 legs. It can have about 100 to 400 in actuality. As they grow, as I told you, they start getting more and more. So, 400 hopefully is tops for them. And just when it comes to housing them, it's very similar to the cockroach, to the tarantula. Well, in the sense that they really need to have kind of a damp environment and have probably enough crawling space in general. So we're mostly talking about like burrowers and how they like to stay on the ground. They don't really climb very much, so they can. And with that in mind, you probably need a lid for your tank again. So make sure that it's always secure. But floor space is like maximum need for them. And as I said, millipedes like to burrow. Same thing as the tarantula and cockroach. And you're going to probably need to have like a bit of like moss or some sort of soil mixture that doesn't have any fertilizer or chemical added to it. And that can be basically the base of the tank that they're in. And then this could be like covered with more types of moss and like tree bark, all kinds of stuff that they can go under for cover, when they get skittish. And another thing that they also list is leaf litter. And, well, it's great if you live near trees. And people will probably think, well, what about the bugs that are on leaves? Well, apparently you can freeze those leaves and, well, it'll kill off, like, basically most of those bugs. So that's something to think about, especially for the people that are interested in, like, doing, scrapbooking. Yeah, that's it. Scrapbooking. So when it comes to, like, how warm or how cold it should be, there's a lot of back and forth about it, but I'm seeing like the average of like 70 degrees Fahrenheit to 80 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's kind of the range that I'm gathering here. But either way, you should probably, be very conscientious. Watch how your pet millipede behaves in certain temperatures. And just kind of moderate based on that and adjust as needed. Now for food and water, the great thing about them is they're herbivores. The unfortunate thing about it is that they like decaying material. So mostly you're going to be giving them like a variety of vegetables and fruits cut into small pieces because they have little mouths. And softer vegetables and fruits are the best. For them in particular, again, because, well, basically eating is not challenging, but, it's different. And this food can be, like, fed in, like, small dishes, a jar lid, and you need to provide food at least, once a day. And then, depending on how much they consume, you would feed them again. They do prefer food that is decaying, as I said. So leaving it out for, a day or two wouldn't be that much of a problem. It'd mostly be like an eyesore for you, if anything. And, well, it is a good idea for some leaf litter, just so that they can eat at it too, because, well, there are possibly little bugs in there, but mostly going back to the herbivore kind of deal. Well, they'll probably eat the leaves. But here's a really interesting thing about them. They have to have like calcium supplements. So like having like a dusting of calcium is something that you should definitely do for this pet. And I mean, they again need to have a shallow dish of water because, well, and also maybe some rocks at the bottom because they could potentially fall in and drown. So, back to the cockroach, right? So, no vets are actually going to be willing to take care of your pet. That is the one major thing about giant millipedes. So, basically the owner is going to be taking responsibility for all of the health stuff. So, probably YouTube videos, advice from forums, all that kind of stuff. Use those as your guide. Make sure it's kind of reputable information, though. So mostly you kind of need to keep a good eye on just maintaining their habitat, maintaining their food and water, keeping them in less stressful situations. And basically, if they start losing their appetite, or if they're lethargic, or there's like some fungus on their shell, or like they have a dull shell versus their shiny shells, well, then you should really definitely do something about it. So again, check their habitats. And if nothing else is coming back, you have resources now. The internet is a wonderful thing. So I would definitely say, for this particular pet, I'm going to look at the picture again. Let me look at the picture. I mean, if you think of it like a man's mustache that has like extra bristles on the feet, at the bottom of the mustache, you can think of it as kind of funny and cute, right? That's definitely what I'm gathering there. I just don't know. But it could be worse. And I'm trying to think of something that could be worse than that. Either way, I would definitely dare you to make something similar that looks like it, and then pull a prank. And for your more bug-frightened people, like me, of course. But we are going to go on a break now. Please don't send any fake millipedes to me, ever. Or I will never forgive any of you. And we will be talking next about the mealworm, which I actually have never heard of before, so this is kind of exciting. Alright, we'll be back after the break.
Is weird, odd, strange, or just plain bizarre is really your cup of tea? Then the Golden State Media Concepts Weird News Podcast will give you that fix. Can't believe it? Well, listen for yourself as we deliver the strangest news you definitely won't find on CNN or Fox. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Weird News Podcast.
Welcome. So, we were just talking about the millipede, the giant millipede, and, well, that didn't seem so bad. And I said that we would talk then about something called mealworms. And, from a certain point of view, as Obi-Wan said, from a certain point of view, mealworms are much better. To an extent. Definitely not for the pet owner or the kid that has these mealworms, because, well, you're raising them for something, that is for sure. So, they're actually, mealworms are like the larvae of the mealworm beetles. And they are used as a food source for many different kinds of exotic pets. So, it's kind of like the underdog pet. So, you can feed reptiles, amphibians, lizards, sugar gliders, skunks, and other animals, of various sizes. You can feed the mealworm to those, and it'll be a part of their diet. But, purchasing live food sources on a regular basis is very inconvenient and expensive. So, that's why people start raising their own. So, they're easy to breed, and they're easy to feed your exotic pet. Oh man, this is interesting. But yeah, as I'm saying, it sounds like the underdog here, and with proper setup, just breeding them, they will start a new colony within like 15 minutes. And it'll take about 2 months for them to be like a full cycle, and you can have like plenty and quiet, just kind of like an ease of mind here when it comes to a supply of mealworms. So for any of your pets. And here's the thing. I have it on a pet podcast episode, so surely people use it as your exotic pets. That's why I included it in, in this episode, because, well, you know what? I think almost any pet can be an exotic pet if it's not a cat, dog, bird, or anything, that just kind of pops into your mind when you think pet. So, man, I'm looking at this website and it's asking, well, it's basically saying how to raise mealworms. So, I will take it as a way of how to take care of your exotic pet. Is that you need to get a small plastic storage bin and, like one for shoes that you can just poke holes into on the top. And then you are going to put the container that light can kind of hit it easily, and, also make sure that it's secure enough that the worms won't escape. So then, number 2, you're going to place 1 to 2 inches of bran, like oats or like a mixture of the two, in the bottom of the container. This will be your mealworms' bedding, and it'll give them something to eat and burrow in. And just to go ahead and say this, I'm using the Spruce Pets website, How to Raise Mealworms, if you wanted to get more information on this. Because honestly, this is kind of fascinating to me, and I don't know why it is. But, on with the show. Now, the third thing that they say is to place half of a raw potato on the substrate or in a shallow dish for the mealworms to eat and drink. So, basically on the floor of it or a dish. So, then you can start purchasing maybe about a dozen mealworms from the pet store to use as your starter colony. Or, you could just have a giant colony of mealworms in your backyard. That'll definitely be interesting for visitors, that is for sure. But then, number 5, you're going to place the mealworms in this prepared container, and you're going to make sure it stays, relatively warm. And if it's winter, you definitely could get like a inexpensive heating pad. If the mealworms get too cold, their development will stop. And this is why they are stored in the refrigerator at the pet store. That's interesting. Okay. But anyway, so number 6. The more I'm reading about this, the more excited I am. Is that kind of weird? Like I now want to go and get some mealworms? But back to the show. Number 6, replace the potato every couple of days. Do not let it get moldy. So your mealworms can have fresh food and water. Okay. And now, since the mealworms are already in a larval stage, they should start developing more in about 3 weeks. And then 2 weeks later after that, they become beetles. Now, I've never seen a mealworm beetle. So we'll definitely check that out after the show for me. But let's see. After that, when the beetles come out, you are going to be letting the beetles start laying very small eggs, which will be very difficult for you to see, but don't worry, they are breeding. Now, when these eggs hatch, the new larvae will come out and they'll be very, very small too. And from there, the beetles will die while the larva grows and the cycle just continues to repeat. So after one cycle, the mealworm should be well established and you can start using them to feed your exotic pet. So, let's just back up for a second. What I pulled up and what was suggested to me as a popular exotic pet that was an insect is actually something you can use to feed, other animals, exotic pets, and probably, go to a farm and give it to your local farmer. I don't know if that's possible, but hey, that seems like a seems like something that you could do. But overall, what you could say about this is that you can have as many mealworms as you want. And they are very low maintenance because they only eat like a potato. You just have to keep them warm. And just make sure that the top is secured, it sounds like. That seems, man, it sounds way too easy. Let's see. There has to be something more about them being as a pet. Man, so I'll just go ahead and say, they look like absolutely low maintenance kinds of pets. Again, just keep them warm. Make sure they have a potato and water. And if you so choose to sell them and have people feed it to their pets, then, I mean, that's not really treating them like a pet, so that'd mean you'd be a breeder. But if you were to have just a small little colony, you would be able to, I would imagine you would be able to lock it down so it doesn't get too out of control. And also, this is kind of weird, but they kind of make me think of those worms that in like cartoons where you kind of see a bird like pulling it out and you see all these little segments in it. Like, it makes me think of that. And it's, it makes worms seem less disgusting when you think of them like in the animated form. So that's how I'm going to think of it now. But overall, I would say, based on all the other stuff that we've had to consider, if you did want a mealworm, it would be probably one of the easiest things ever. But anyway, we are going to take another break, and I bet that everyone was ready for this. We're going to be talking about scorpions, right? Exciting. Frightening, too. So we will be right back.
The Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast, the show that gives you advice on everything travel. We explore places you've always wanted to go, as well as giving tips for traveling in those places. We'll give you advice on the best sites for travel tips, information, and discounts. Join us as we travel the world, explore cultures, and meet new people. The Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast has got you covered. Download the GSMC Travel Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
We are back, and we were talking about mealworms, which are exotic pets that are also made to be food for your exotic pets. So I thought it would be funny if I talked about scorpions, because they actually have mealworms as a part of their regular diet. So, in general, scorpions have been, kind of been skewered by popular culture, right? And you see them as like in people where they are trapped and somebody's trying to kill them. You see it in like horror movies, adventure movies, all that kind of stuff. But the reality is that for the most part, if you were to actually get an emperor scorpion, a lot of that would be gone. It's still intimidating looking because it's like 6 inches long, average, and just the claws and the stinger, all of it just kind of comes together to be like a little monster. But, I'm not going to bash on the scorpion. After all, it is probably one of the creatures that I would probably, more than likely, have as my own. I would say mostly because they're quiet, they're clean, and they're easy to care for. They are extremely docile. And, you know, depending on how you view it, the same thing with, like, all the other pets. Like, they are kind of like a long-term kind of animal. So 6 to 8 years for them. And all the other things you have to consider, too, well, actually, this is the main thing. You will probably not be able to find a pet sitter for your scorpion because nobody knows how to handle them. Which leads to my other thought, and that is you really can't pet this kind of pet. It's, you know, it's either you could get stung, you could get clawed at, you could get, clawed, pinched at. Sorry, I'm thinking of my cat right now. And, well, you could possibly drop it and it could get hurt. So all of these things you have to kind of be very careful for if you really want to have a scorpion. And let's be honest, scorpions are kind of, you know, it's a cool thing to have these days. So either way, if you know how to take care or be gentle, then that is going to be something that really helps you to become a good scorpion owner. And, well, overall, like, emperor scorpions, as I said, are pretty docile. They're not really as dangerous as some other scorpion species, because, yeah, there are more. And, like, if it were to sting you, it would be kind of like a bee sting. So, like how I said with the tarantula. So they would actually be like a bee sting, and a little painful, and unless you're allergic to it or you have like some kind of reaction to it, then like anaphylactic shock, then you don't really have to go to the ER for that. So let me clarify. If you get stung by a scorpion, an emperor scorpion, well, the only thing you would have to worry about is having an anaphylactic shock or reaction to it. So because of that, you should really keep your friends in mind if they decided to handle your scorpion, and again, that's kind of a no-no at this point. If handling is absolutely necessary, so like cleaning their living space, well, where you should get some forceps, let's see, a long-handled forceps, and have some foam over the grips so that you can pick up your scorpion with just the stinging end, so that, you know, you can keep it away from you, and you're still being gentle with it. And yeah, unless this feels threatened, the scorpion is not going to sting you. So just, you know, keep your space. It's like having a cat. If you don't provoke it, it's not going to scratch you or bite you. Kind of the same deal there. Now, so I'm talking about like cleaning their living space. So what does the living space look like? Well, emperor scorpions are from Africa, and it's humid, it's a warm environment, and these guys are also nocturnal. So you have to really be careful about how to intentionally set up their living space. Mostly you need to make sure they get proper heat, and the humidity levels need to be, you know, taken into account for very seriously. So 10-gallon tanks are perfect for a few, well, maybe 2 scorpions. And you definitely need to have like little hiding spots and places that they can, you know, burrow into. It's, you know, it's a very kind of like a millipede kind of animal, and maybe sometimes tarantula kind of animal. But either way, you want to make sure that it has like some soft bedding, like soil, honestly. And I would also say that for them, just let them be, maybe provide some bark, some pieces of bark for them, flat stones. You could even have like a ceramic pot if you wanted, that's, you know, kind of broken. And like one thing that Spruce Pets also talks about is having like reptile hide as a hiding spot too, which is kind of weird and freaky at the same time, but, well, weird and freaky. Kind of weird and scary at the same time. Now, I mean, the entire soil needs to be nice and thick for them so that they can burrow, and then you can put more moss on top of it, and it'll help retain more of the moisture that it needs so that it can live in its warmer, humid environment. So don't be very particular about how their living space looks exactly. They just need the things that they need. So they kind of think of it like props. And those props will be moved around, for many, many times, and you may as well not waste your energy on that. Let the scorpions decide what they want to do with that. And, when it comes to heat, you do have, you could have like a heating lamp, and it should be around 70 to 90 degrees, as a good range for it. But there are also some people that set their, temperature to 100 just because, well, I don't even know if they say a reason for it, but it's a way to really help with how they maintain their body and how they regulate the warmth inside of them. So the easiest way to, provide this gradient kind of heat, from the 70 to sometimes 100, well, you'll need some sort of heating mat that is designed for reptile tanks. And, I mean, once you get there, well, what do you got to eat? Well, of course, mealworms. But you also can feed them 6 adult crickets a week. Yeah. So you could have one every single night, every other day or so. And it has to be kind of replicating in the same way that it would in its natural habitat. But hey, just make sure you provide a shallow water dish that allows a scorpion to drink if it needs to. Make sure it's not too deep because you know what, it might drown. I think that's a trend here. Now, some common problems for the most part is just scorpions can suffer from dehydration. So making sure that they get enough water, or, also just going to your vet in case it doesn't seem like it's just the water. So that's really about it for, your emperor scorpion. And it's, the pictures are pretty cool. It makes me want to have one of them. And it also, I'm looking at another picture now, and it's so big and scary. I think I remember seeing from someone it was a combination of a lobster, a wasp, and a crab. And a part of me can see all of those in this picture. Yeah, definitely, when you get the chance, look up a picture of a scorpion, and you will definitely see what I'm saying here. Whew. So now we're moving on to our final segment, which means you get to learn a little bit more about how my pets have made my life difficult sometimes. Don't worry, I still love them. They are the light of my life, but there are problems there. Typical, right? Anyway, we will be back after these commercials.
Want to find out what movies to go see? Then check out the GSMC Movie Podcast. It's your ticket to the latest movies, whether it's a new blockbuster event, romantic, comedy, or action flick. This show has got it all covered. They talk some what to go see now. Don't bother. What's hot on Netflix and everything in between. That's GSMCpodcast.com/movie-podcast. When it's all about the movies, it has to be this new show. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
So we are back, and, well, we were talking about all kinds of creepy crawlies that probably in the past, well, actually I know in the past I've used as writing prompts for Halloween, actually. So, I want to move on to another thing, because it's cuter, and that's, well, my cat, Eisen, and then also baby Reggie. So, last week when I was preparing this episode, I left my computer, and, well, I have a little nappy spot where Eisen can nap at whenever I record, and as I was away, and I had it turned and had part of I had the laptop slightly closed so it could still run, but somehow Eisen managed to mute the microphone that was replaying the tracks for mixing, and I was gone for maybe about 15 minutes, and when I got back, it was, I think there was only like 10 minutes, well, there was like 10 minutes of silence in the final mix for it, so that was quite frustrating, and, I think he probably did it by, well, most definitely by accident, but he probably was just chilling about, and I should have known better. I just should have known better. He's usually pretty good about just staying until I'm done, but not that night. He wanted his food, I guess. Yes, my husband was getting ready to feed the pets for the night, but that's okay. I also have this other weird story of Reggie, and it's not really a story, but it kind of makes me think of a future episode I'm going to do for you guys. And, well, the morning of Eisen's little doing against me, Reggie was being very, she was acting kind of strange, and she was kind of heaving up a little bit, but nothing was coming out. And I was getting really concerned because she kept on doing it over and over again. And then finally, she was just able to, let it all come out after eating her breakfast, pretty much. And, a lot of food came out, a lot of yellow stuff came out. Yes, I'm being really gross right now. But something that looked like a sock was in the puke. And we weren't sure at first if it was a sock. But, we looked closer, and we kind of took a paper towel to it, and yeah, most definitely it was a sock, and yeah, it was my sock. So the thing with Reggie is that she likes socks. She will take as many socks as she can, and whenever she sees us putting on a sock, she will try to steal it from us. Yeah, she just wants it. And I don't know why. Maybe there's a reason for it, but any chance that she gets, she's gonna do it. There's no other piece of clothing that she will just hide for herself. She will definitely pick up some other clothes if she wants, but she's not going to be so guarded about those. So, actually I didn't emphasize this. My puppy ate a sock. And, it wasn't a crew cut sock. It was an ankle sock, so it wasn't that big. But still, what does this dog put in her mouth? My God. You see plastic, you see other dogs poop, but a sock? It was not even torn to pieces. It was just intact. How? I don't know. And I wonder how many socks I've lost to her, actually. Actually my sock drawer has seemed kind of light, so who knows, maybe she's stealing the socks and keeping it for her snack time. And if that's the case, we need to definitely secure socks, because we're not having her eat and throw up more socks. The really frustrating thing is, I was so concerned for her. She was just not acting like Reggie, and I was just keeping an eye on her. And, this is something that's very important to do. If your pet is acting strangely, then you should keep an eye on them, see if the behavior changes, or if they do something that, that causes the change to happen, or if no change happens. So, either way, you need to watch your pets, during this time when they are acting strange, because you never know what's going to happen. to be honest, there are a lot of things that, can cause problems for your pets. Like, I remember watching, like, on the Animal Planet, like, this woman's dog ate, like, 12 rocks. And he had been, like, not well, he'd been lethargic, and it was very scary for the family, and most definitely would have been scary for me. But, gosh, 12 rocks. Was there hot sauce on it? Was there cheese on it? Well, either way, before you get mad at me for making little jokes, the dog did survive. And his owners were much better about watching him whenever he went outside. They made sure he wasn't eating any more rocks, or they were trying their best to make sure he wasn't doing that. Because, well, sometimes I wonder, like, dogs can be smart, but why would they swallow rocks? I think that's a good question to ask, right? A very good question. Because it kind of baffles me whenever this kind of stuff comes in the news. Like, there was a story about, and a meme actually, about this dog who ate an entire hollow chocolate egg for Easter and was taken to the hospital, and he lived. Yes, he lived. Thank God. But they had a picture of him with the vet tech, and she was holding on to like an egg for show, just to let people know how big the egg was and what exactly they were talking about. And in her other arm, there was the dog that had gone through that surgery. And the vet tech's looking straight at the camera, smiling, and do you know what that dog was looking at instead of the camera? No, not the floor. No, not at the Savior's face. It was looking directly and really staring down that wrapped chocolate egg, as if it had not learned its lesson. So, I mean, pets do some crazy stuff. And, well, yes, it can be stupid too. Though I can't really remember. What was the last stupid thing that Eisen ever did? Actually, my cat is a genius, so he probably never got into any trouble like that. Except for eating all of his food at, whenever he could. But I imagine that Cookie also had some times in her life where she did something stupid. Well, I will say that she still likes stealing Reggie's food, and that causes a bit of tension, which is understandable. But it's not Reggie being the one that's mean, it's Cookie that's being mean because, well, she found the food. It's hers, right? Anyway, pets have always been a very interesting thing for me to watch, and, like, it's a very comforting feeling, just to have them around. And, the stories that you're able to tell with your pets, like, it's a long-lasting thing that you just can't get rid of. And I imagine that I will probably have more stories about Eisen being a little jerk to me in future episodes, actually. But anyway, it's really important to think about, the importance of taking care of your pets and making sure that you have the best kind of, the best kind of environment for them. Because, well, you never know what might cause problems for them. Like, I don't know, this is a really dumb thing, but I was watching Jurassic Park with my husband the other night, and we kind of were talking about the roles of the characters, like Alan Grant and Ellie Sattler? Yeah. And how she was actually in her, basically, like a botanist, a paleobotanist? Yes, that's it. So she was most definitely concerned whenever she saw, like, any plants that were toxic and would not be a good pairing between the dinosaurs and the food, the greenery, of course. So she actually flat out said, like, sometimes you were just putting things there just because it looked good and not because it was good for the environment, the surrounding environment. But anyway, I could probably talk more about Jurassic Park a little more later, because I think that there are a lot of things you could talk about there, actually. Oh, man. But, you know, I'm going to slow down for tonight, and I'm just going to say thank you for listening to the GSMC Pets Podcast. It's brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network, and I would love it if you would just subscribe and write a nice review for us. And I always like the feedback. They always like the feedback. And we also like to make friends too. So, you know, please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram would be perfect. But more importantly, and more perfect, would be for you guys to have a wonderful night. Thank you.
You've been listening to the GSMC Pets Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcasts on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all of the shows from the GSMC Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, from business news to weird news. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's podcast.